Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. I'm no qua, Osinachi. One name, Osinachi. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. Mama, Osinachi. Not because I suffer fast, Not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. Akwachi. Daily Osinachi. Namnukwa Osinachi. One Osinachi. Akwachi. Daily Osinachi. Mama Osinachi. Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. Akwachi, daily Osinachi. Namnukwa Osinachi. One Osinachi. Akwachi, daily Osinachi. Mama Osinachi.
Hey, what you?
Over to you, Prince.
Hi, everyone. So Waliu is supposed to chair the panel, and I am trying to reach out to him. So please give me a second.
Hello, Prince. Can you start while you wait for Wally? Pick up where you
Um, LSA, so while you said he's unable to join because he was removed, said the host removed him from joining.
Yes, because his name was not on the list, but I discovered that he's supposed to be on the plan.
Please add him back.
Once he joins, I will add it. He has not joined back.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry for the little delay and inconveniences. My name is Prince. I'm at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Third year PhD student who has interest in history of technologies and histories of indigenous epistemology in Africa. Sometime 2 years ago, I started thinking about histories of technologies and histories of indigenous epistemologies. And I started asking certain questions. How best could we study and document or write the histories of technologies, the histories of indigenous epistemology from African standpoints? In other words, how do we think about STS from Africa? Scholars like Klapati Mavunga and Joshua Grace, and even Professor Gloria Emeagwali have also done a lot of work on this area, but I still believe that a lot, or there is room to grow or to still expand the field, and that is why I thought it was important to call for this panel in the 6th LSA. So we are going to start the presentation while we hope that Waliu joins us. But before we start, I would like us to introduce ourselves and our institutions and areas of research. Then we'll now go through the order for the panel. Thank you very much.
Just a second, please, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I just want to be sure that where I am, the connection is good enough, or I should change the location. I didn't have a chance to test this connection before now on this network. So am I clear enough?
Yes, perfectly clear.
Am I clear enough? Am I visible also? Can I talk from here? I should go to somewhere. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Who speaks, please?
Yeah, so we can start from Professor Gloria, and then through Cleo, Chiagozie, Valeria.
Okay, are you hearing me? You should. Right. So I'm Gloria Magwali. It's a pleasure to be here. I thank the coordinator of the panel for inviting me. I taught at Madu Bello University, University of Ilorin, the Nigeria Defense Academy before teaching or moving to the United States, to Connecticut State University. I guess the experience in Nigeria has been eternal, long lasting. All right, let me just say that finally, because I guess other people will introduce themselves, I have been interested in African indigenous knowledge systems and African science and technology for quite a while, and have continued to have a passionate interest in that. I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Professor Gloria. Cleo?
Hi, it's lovely to meet you all. Thank you so much, Vincent. Sorry. I am a PhD student at the London School of Economics. My interests lie in the impact of nuclear power in the process of African decolonization. And I think my paper is slightly different from yours in the way that I perhaps am less directly talking about technology, but more how the discourse about technology is negotiated in the process of decolonization. But I so look forward to your papers. They look absolutely fascinating. So I'm just humbled to be here. Thank you again, Prince.
You're welcome. Shagozie?
Thank you. Greetings from Lagos. My name is Chigozie Anako. I'm an MA student. Yes. My name is Chigozie Anako. I'm an MA student at the University of Lagos Institute of African and Diaspora Studies. I'll be anchoring this session on the Igbo apprenticeship system in Ikeja Computer Village. I have a bachelor's degree in history and international studies from Lagos State University. And before I joined University of Lagos for the graduate program, I had experience of over 10 years as an ICT entrepreneur, and then that environment I'm discussing today is somewhere I have been very conversant with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chigozie. The last but not the least, Valeria.
Hello, my name is Valerie Noor. I'm a postdoc in anthropology at the University of Bayreuth in Germany. I defended my thesis on craft as a social practice among Tuareg craftspeople in Niger last year at the Bayreuth International Graduate School of African Studies. So in Bayreuth, we have a focus on African studies. And I studied anthropology at the University of Basel, in University de Provence, and in Berlin. And usually with a focus like on Africa, investigating skills, body knowledge, mobility, and learning. At the moment, I'm publishing the thesis as a book, and I'm in parental leave at the same time, so I'm trying to balance book and baby. However, I managed to be here today, so yeah, looking forward to all your presentations and the discussion.
Great. So we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to present in this order. For our presentation, we have 10 minutes each, and then we would receive feedback and questions within the next with 7 minutes, and then round up. So we'll go in this order. The Igbo Apprenticeship Model and Technology Entrepreneurship by Chigozie would come first. Then we have Innovations and Inventions. by Professor Gloria, then Nuclear Sciences by Cleo, and finally, Toolmaking as a Reference to the World by Valeria. So, Chigozie, over to you.
Chigozie, I think you're muted.
Okay, I guess it's having issues with the network. Professor Gloria, I don't know if it's all right if you go first while you wait for Chigozie to get ready. Prof, you're muted.
Okay, let me speak. Can I? Can I present now?
You can.
All right, so I'll permit me to share my screen, please. I'm unable to share screen, please.
LSA, please permit him to share his screen.
Please let me take the next slots while I copy my file to another device.
Okay, then.
So
Professor.
I'll continue then.
All right, thank you.
And I hope. Okay, so I don't know what happened here. Window. Okay, so all right, so my topic is ancient African knowledge systems, inventions, and innovations with reference to Southern Africa. And what happened here? The focus of the paper, of course, is African Indigenous knowledge systems. The paper points out that to know about Africa's past technologies, science, and so on, we must tap into multidisciplinary platforms. So that's one of the first things with respect to epistemologies, multidisciplinary platforms. And we must reset the boundaries of early invention and innovation, of course, to a much earlier era than usually projected. In other words, we should follow the data and not just fit into some kind of, in some cases, Eurocentric boundary. The initial discourse is on the conceptual framework and theoretical underpinnings utilized in the paper, and I make some historiographical references. With respect to conceptual underpinnings, well, first of all, the term African Indigenous Knowledge System. By the way, are you hearing me well?
Yeah, yes, please.
Oh, okay. The term African Indigenous Knowledge Systems would refer to the conglomerate of intersecting epistemologies, technologies, value systems, and innovations in societies that have developed ways of existence and diverse paradigms for doing and knowing. And the inventions and innovations are integrally related to that, integrally related to Indigenous knowledge systems, symbiotically and diachronically. They are both the product of local expertise and initiative and Indigenous epistemic traditions over time and space. And they interact as well. So inventions may be seen as inventions would be seen as part of this general overall discussion of AIK. But we have to realize that it is often impossible to assign the name of one inventor to a novel process or product. And although easy in the African context, or relatively easy to assign community and group identity. So in terms of, again, epistemological guidelines, we've got to be aware that we could follow the pathway of group identity for techniques, devices, and so on. The concept of collaborative innovation, for example, is of major relevance for understanding and knowing about Africa. The patient accumulation of small improvements is also at play. And so creativity is collective. The sort of flash of genius perception that we would see in terms of discussing science and technology, innovations, inventions, and so on elsewhere may not necessarily apply. Ethnic identity, religious affiliation, gender, and so on, the shared understanding of the group will have to be brought into consideration. And so, I don't know what happened here. The inventions may be product or process related. For example, watercraft, such as the Dufuna boat found in northeast Nigeria, dated around 6000 BC, or novel ways of storing pigment, as seen about 100,000 years ago in Blombos in southern Africa. And inventions, of course, may be part conceptual, part experimental. The point to note, of course, is that for some reason we're going backwards here, but inventions and innovations might also entail a break with previous methodologies and may be disruptive. Although there's a distinction made by one scholar between sustaining and disruptive innovations and technologies. But innovations may build on pre-existing techniques, may involve modification of earlier methods, may lead to the observation and questioning of pre-existing methodologies, may incorporate diverse forms of experimentation. The gender issue must be noted as well. Invention and innovation, and again in the African context, would have a huge female input with respect to ceramics and textiles, whilst in orthopedics and metallurgy, we have this tendency to exclude women. But again, we may, after research, modify this observation, but this seems to be the current information. Now, one thing to bear in mind, of course, is that issues related to AIK, inventions and innovations, have inspired research by other scholars. George Sefadia, for example, has written on the critical epistemological issues related to this. And we have, in the South African case, KwaZulu-Natal, we have university fostering a very well-recognized doctorate scenario with respect to AIK. Misha Gombo, Mosimege, and so on. Have been some others. I actually mentioned a few of my works too: historical development of science and technology in Nigeria, systems of science, technology, and art, and so on and so on. And in the case of Southern Africa, that is our area of focus, and I don't know how much time I have left, but I want to point out that Christopher Ehret made a point in 2019 at his Harvard University lecture that Africa led the way with the world's first ceramic spindles for spinning cotton thread, in the case of Nubia, broad looms for raffia weaving, Nigeria and Cameroon, iron metallurgy, and the dates that are commonly put in the textbooks have to be revised. We're going back to 2300 BC. And this is one of the earliest, if not the earliest, for metallurgy. Steel as well, East Africa, and then areas of crop domestication. So what are Southern Africa's first in terms of invention and innovation? And where would these activities take place? That's a question. And what is the significance of Blombos and Mapungubwe, areas of Southern Africa, for this discourse on indigenous creativity, inventiveness, and pioneering activity? Well, we have to note that a multidisciplinary group of scholars, of archaeologists, anthropologists, natural scientists, and historians have been able to give us a lot of information. Again, highlighting the fact that we have to go the multidisciplinary way in talking about Africa's science, technology, AIK, etc. And Blombos is a good example. Blombos is a place located in the southern tip of South Africa in the Cape region. It has become a metaphor for early human creativity and innovation in the light of the findings mentioned. But we can identify a few of these: innovative use of iron oxide compound for making ochre, pulverized ochre, charcoal, and bone as a protective sunscreen and as a cosmetic, use of binders for holding particles of pigment in the creation of the first known paint in the world, and the earliest known use of chemical principles. When we're talking about the origin of chemistry, we've got to note this. We have also a deliberate storage of paint. Well, the earliest painting and engravings would date to around 75,000 years ago. The grooves were cut on chunks of ochre. And we know as well that this is an area with the earliest known assemblage of perforated objects as jewelry. So we are dealing with some firsts here. The geometric incisions on a slab of stone in a crosshatch pattern at the 73,000-year level should be noted. You see, I am arguing that this has to be taken into consideration in discussions of inventions and innovations. We cannot leave these out. Incidentally, the world's oldest mine, dated at around 43,000 years ago, would be found in the former Swaziland and would be half a century later than these findings. So we still don't know where the early Blombos inhabitants got their hematite for the pigment and paint. These innovations may have been incremental over time, although there would be the eventual abandonment of the site. The collaborative innovation is implied by the intensity of pigment manufacturing and production activity and trial and error experimentation, which will include planning and so on. So what accounts for cumulative innovation in this early period? Well, Wadley in 21 suggests that you have the conjuncture of imagination, cognition, motor skills, need, accessibility to raw materials, we don't know where they were, and some of the variables. And as we move from Blombos to Mapungubwe, which would be in a different time period, we note also evidence of innovation and invention and innovation. The settlements would include some of these listed, Zizo, Liukwe, etc. And the dominant languages in the area would be Shona, Venda, Soto, and Swana. We're talking largely about the northern part of South Africa and the confluence region, in terms of the Limpopo River. Well, Mapungubwe, which means the place where rocks turn into molten liquid, it would be known for innovations in gold mining techniques, as reflected in nails, scepters, anklets, necklaces, bowls, and so on. I was very fortunate to be able to see some of these in the museum in Pretoria before they were moved further north. And even further north, I was able to see them too. The iconic golden rhino is a unique invention in gold foil, both in terms of product and process. The innovations for Mapungubwe further north would be the pouring of molten gold into water to be flattened and punched, placement of gold foil over wooden objects, and of course, local geological knowledge would have guided the miners to the gold-bearing ore. So the thesis of collaborative innovation and collective creativity seems applicable based on oral traditions and also the cultural practices in the region. And this would have been accomplished in the context of incremental sustaining innovation, which changes over time in both product and process. So to conclude, we began with a focus on some of the theoretical issues related to AIK inventions and innovation. We'd see interaction between these three, and also the historiographical precedents. We also provided examples from early antiquity in the case of Blombos and from late antiquity with respect to Mapungubwe. Mapungubwe was a place really unknown in the history text, but we have to, whilst, of course, researchers were fully aware of the various treasures, so to speak, coming from that area. Anyway, we concluded that inventions and innovations would emerge in terms of product and process and collaborative ventures and should be taken into account and not ignored, as is the tendency in discussions of ancient Southern African history and ancient indigenous knowledges. So let's see, how do I get out of here? All right, is anybody hearing me?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I guess you may want to stop sharing your screen now. And thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. I think, okay, so question and answer will come in the end of everyone's presentation, then we can now have discussion. So I don't think Chigozie is ready. So Cleo, are you ready to go?
Yes, I'm ready. But maybe if Professor Gloria, you stop sharing your screen, maybe I can share mine. And Prince, sorry again for your name. As you can see, my brain has extinguished before my Wi-Fi, but
It's totally
hopefully
fine.
it will survive. I still can't share. Brilliant. Okay. So please, can you confirm that you can see my PowerPoint, but not my notes? Can you all see my
The
PowerPoint?
PowerPoint, yeah, we can.
With the blue arrow?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to go slightly over 10 minutes because you said we could do up to 15. So I'm going to be very naughty, but I promise I'll try to be fast and efficient. So thank you again to the LSA for this wonderful opportunity. And I'm really, really humbled to be amongst these wonderful papers. I hope I'll be up to the task. Okay, so without further ado, let's just jump straight in. Right. So I'm a historian, so I'm going to talk a bit about dates. And here we're in February 1960, okay? And this is when France conducted its first atomic test in the Algerian Sahara, almost 3,000 kilometers from Lagos, where some of you may be. Radioactive debris from the French test soon reached Nigeria. And to give you a better idea of the trajectory of French fallout, I've tried to represent it here with this blue arrow linking Algeria to Nigeria on your screen. Now imagine that months and months before this happened, France insisted that the test would be safe. And Britain also promoted that narrative in a bid to safeguard its interest in Nigeria without offending France. But Nigerians contested this narrative on nuclear safety, okay? They argued that if a nuclear test took place in the Sahara, radioactive debris could harm their health, environment, and future generations. So in this story, we see two competing narratives about the safety of nuclear technology, right? And interestingly, both the Nigerian side and the European side appeal to scientific narratives, to scientific arguments to make their case. Yet on both sides, I want to think about how perhaps narrative about the danger or the safety of nuclear testing were as much a product of scientific knowledge as they were informed by feelings of trust and mistrust, by assumptions about each side's relationship to science, and by varying degrees of inclusion in broader political processes. So in line with the epistemological framing of this panel, therefore, I'm trying to be a good student. I am interested in how scientific narratives about nuclear technology were produced, packaged, and negotiated on the eve of Nigerian independence. So the paper will take you through several key moments in this process, from the peak in anti-nuclear sentiment in the summer of 1959 to the publication in April 1960 of a Nigerian report on French radioactive fallout. So researching this story really changed the way I look at other science-based narratives which have implications for public health policy. And perhaps you too will notice parallels with contested narratives around climate change or COVID vaccines or wearing a mask, okay? And this is still a work in progress. I really look forward to your thoughts. Don't be shy. I really want your comments here. Right, so anti-nuclear sentiment in Nigeria peaked as the country was preparing for independence. By the summer of 1959, every single newspaper had condemned French nuclear plans, and all the main political parties had officially opposed the atomic test. Okay, this is huge. Trade unions veterans, students, academics, and women's groups all tried to stop the French test from happening. And all this commotion worried the British, who were also criticized for their alliance with France. They tried to keep Nigerian protests under control, but their analysis of nuclear skepticism in Nigeria was flawed. The British distinguished between two categories of anti-nuclear discourse. In the first category, they placed what they saw as the genuine but irrational and emotional anxiety of the common man. I don't know if you can see me, the lights off, but these are scare quotes. I'm not using these words personally. In the second category, they place the anti-nuclear discourse of educated elites. So contrary to the common man, the British thought that Nigerians' political elites did not really believe that nuclear tests could be dangerous. Elites were merely capitalizing on popular ignorance for their own political gain. So for the British, therefore, Nigerian anti-nuclear sentiment was a product either of ignorance or of demagogy. This distinction tells us more about how the British thought of their own relation to science and to different Nigerian classes than it tells us about Nigerian attitudes to nuclear technology, right? The British equated higher class, education, and political power, all of which they considered themselves to share to some degree with male Nigerian elites, with a capacity to trust nuclear technology almost instinctively. And this is important because these assumptions determined how the British dealt with the unraveling crisis. In other words, it had an impact on policy. The British launched public information campaigns to counter what they saw as a Nigerian tendency towards superstition. For instance, they warned people of forthcoming solar eclipses, which had nothing to do with the test, to make sure that natural phenomena would not be blamed on the French nuclear tests. This strategy flattered colonial cosmology because it entertained the notion that Nigerians would naturally succumb to traditional belief systems in the face of Western technology. As the British believed that the problem of anti-nuclear sentiment lay not in the French atomic test, but with the Nigerians themselves, they thought they could help Nigerians to become more rational, more trusting of science. And for me, this is really fascinating because if you think of it, the British colonial officials dealing with the issue did not have more reasons to trust nuclear technology than Nigerians had reasons to be suspicious of it. Okay, what I mean is that these British officials, you have to imagine, they were not trained in nuclear science, but they trusted it because they associated themselves with Britain and dissociated themselves from Nigerians. So enough with the British. If we finally try to look beyond this British interpretation, it seems that the surge of anti-nuclear sentiment in the summer of 59 was in fact triggered by two main developments. In July, Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah had sent a letter of protest to the French asking them to abandon their atomic plans. And when the French rejected this letter, Nigerians saw French disregard for African concerns as a continuation of imperialism. There was therefore undoubtedly a political dimension to Nigerian anti-nuclear sentiment, but what the British saw as politically motivated protests were not necessarily disingenuous, nor were they confined to Nigeria's elite. For many Nigerians, it was inconceivable that France would test nuclear weapons on a continent that was in the process of freeing itself from colonial rule. Now, second factor. A few days after Ghana's protest, anonymous scientists from the University of Ibadan published an article warning against the consequences of nuclear tests in the Sahara. Using a hybridization of nuclear science and local ecology, these scientists suggested that Nigerians could suffer disproportionately from French tests, considering their reliance on cereals and vegetables. And this was because the higher up the food chain one placed oneself, the less radioactivity one would ingest. The Nigerian scientists insisted that in any case, no one really knew how much radiation the human body could tolerate, and that the best thing to do, therefore, was to avoid testing at all. This undermined the idea that you could set a threshold under which exposure to radiation was safe. So Nigerian skepticism was also based on scientific arguments and on an analysis of the state of nuclear knowledge worldwide. These arguments were grafted onto the longer-term experience of Western colonialism, militarism, and disease. The scientists of Ibadan argue that the Harmattan wind could carry radioactive debris all the way to Nigeria, that therefore it didn't matter if the test was conducted hundreds of kilometers away. Even in normal time, the Harmattan season corresponds to heightened vulnerability to respiratory disease. And in some cases, it's no wonder that the possibility of the wind itself carrying harmful debris revived memories of the 1918 Spanish influenza, which has resulted from Western militarism and coincided with the Harmattan to devastating effect. Now, the persistence of anti-nuclear skepticism in Nigeria was becoming a problem not only for the British, but also for the Nigerian government on which London relied. In September of 1959, a delegation led by Prime Minister Abubakar Tafawa Balewa visited England to convey Nigerian concerns about French tests. Balewa's visit forced British scientists to address Nigerian skepticism on its own terms for once. In a document designed for Nigerian consumption, and which I like to call the Harwell Notes, they applied knowledge about nuclear risk to Nigeria's specific context. So, for example, they argued that the Harmattan wind, which the Nigerians talked a lot about in this context, was a low-level wind, okay? That therefore it would not interfere with French fallout, which supposedly would be higher up. And these arguments thus seemed to constitute a new phase in Britain's attitude towards Nigerian anti-nuclear sentiment. They were acknowledging these arguments. However, Britain remained guided less by science than by the aim of containing panic in Nigeria. And there was still no question of admitting, even to themselves, the possibility that French tests could actually be dangerous. In fact, the British twisted the information they had about the French explosion to consolidate their narrative about nuclear safety. But the Nigerians did not know this, okay? And this is the question about epistemology. And the Harwell Notes convinced Balewa that there was nothing to fear. Finally, in February 1960, the French conducted their atomic test in Algeria in complete defiance of protests throughout Africa. A few days after the atomic test, Balewa was informed that French radioactive fallout had reached Nigeria. The Prime Minister was in shock. Balewa and British colonial officials had worked together to dissipate Nigerian anxieties without seriously considering the possibility of fallout in Nigeria. But now Balewa realized that the British scientists had been wrong. Even though radioactive fallout from the French test was still within the safety threshold defined by international standards, okay, Balewa knew that if France conducted more tests, radioactivity could add up until the safety threshold was exceeded, because some radioactivity never goes away, really. As Balewa's loyalty swung back to the side of the Nigerian people, he was compelled to tell Nigerians the truth about French fallout. This was in his power. Balewa had the exclusive right to publish a report on radioactive measurements in Nigeria. So this has potentially huge implications. Imagine this, an African country, which is still technically under colonial rule, using data collected inside its own borders to undermine the narrative on nuclear safety promoted by nuclear states. However, the publication of the report stalled on a disagreement between British and Nigerian scientists on the formulation of the report's conclusions. Again, this is about how science is packaged into a narrative for public consumption and for political purposes more than science itself. The Nigerian side was eager to emphasize the risk of accumulation, which Balewa had pointed out. In other words, they wanted to argue that radioactivity could become dangerous if France continued its tests. On the other side, British scientists insisted that the tests had been conducted in exceptional weather circumstances. And the implication here, of course, is that French nuclear tests could continue safely because they had simply been unlucky with the weather, and that's why there was radioactivity in Nigeria. The Nigerian report on French nuclear fallout was finally published in April 1960. All mention of the risk of accumulation was gone. By subscribing to the idea that the tests had been conducted in exceptional circumstances, and by expressing the level of radioactive fallout in function of a predefined safety threshold, Nigeria had officially added its voice to the narrative on nuclear safety. Now, I don't know about you, this broke my heart. In my eyes, the failure of the Nigerian government to publish the report in its more damning version represents a missed opportunity to back African anti-nuclear sentiment with data and to ultimately put the French in real difficulty. Spoiler alert, the French continued to test nuclear weapons until 1966 in the Sahara. Okay, my time is running out, so I need to press on to the conclusion. So I've tried to show that negotiations around scientific narratives can evolve somewhat independently from actual advances in scientific knowledge and technology. But this, of course, doesn't mean that they have no link whatsoever with science. What I'm trying to say is that one must look at how power dynamics determine the success or failure of narratives. And this in turn impels us to listen perhaps a bit more closely to the skeptics, to find out when their doubts are valid and when these doubts reflect perhaps a broader lack of trust in society and politics. On the other hand, I've also tried to avoid the conspiracist view according to which the powerful necessarily intend to be misleading and harmful. Instead, I've pointed to the role of racial and cultural assumptions in leading to policy mistakes, albeit very, very bad ones. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you. I hope the PowerPoint was visible. I look forward to your thoughts. It's hot, eh? Thank you. How do I stop? Stop.
All right. Thank you, Theo, for that fascinating presentation. So Chigozie is not here yet. I think Valeria should go now.
Okay, thank you. I'm sharing my screen. I have a very short PowerPoint, only 2 pictures, but so, okay. So I guess you can hear me well. If not, you would let me know, yeah? So when I learned about Prince's panel, the epistemology of African indigenous science and technology, I was excited and eager to submit a paper. I had studied the work of Tuareg artisans in Niger from 2011 to 15, and one chapter of my dissertation is about their work as tool makers. An important argument of this chapter is that since they make their own tools, artisans develop their own technology and thus determine their very grasp onto the material world. They sometimes may use industrially produced files from France to make their tools from. However, this is not a technology transfer from north to south or west to non-west, as Mafunga criticizes the assumption that one has to bring technology to Africa in order to develop it. Indeed, what Tuareg blacksmiths make of these files cannot be explained simply as an appropriation, improvisation, and certainly not simply as the use of technologies received from the West. That would be a devaluation and fails to recognize the enormous expertise and intellect that lies in tool making. In this paper, I argue that Tuareg blacksmiths excel in tool making as makers of technology, and of course, which holds its own epistemology. Tuareg artisans constitute an endogamous professional group, whereas men and women likewise engage in craft. While the women sew bags of many sizes, the men work with wood, iron, non-ferrous metals, silver, raw animal skin, and leather to make items such as spoons, cups, knives, as well as jewelry, weapons, and tools. Every single artisan may be specialized in the production of a certain range of objects. However, they are never limited to working with only one material. And since each material requires its own set of tools, I expected to find a lot of tools in their workshops. So I was surprised to see how sparsely and chaotically the toolboxes seem to be equipped. An example is the toolbox of one smith from Agadez. He was working at the time of my research, and he carved in Agadez, and he carved mainly large objects from wood, such as mortars, pestles, bats, and bowls. He had not only the tools for wood working, but also for metalworking, bellows, a hammer, an anvil, and pliers. In fact, he also sharpened his own tool blades as well as the knives and axes of his customers. However, my attempt to pick up all the tools was strange to him. Yeah. Moreover, his toolbox seemed to have no order. It appeared sparse and incomplete. Akuto had no scrapper and only one file. So how was it possible that he lacked such important tools? And I made many more inventories. The Smith's toolbox, they all contained all sorts of band nails, old rusted wires, and metal plates. And so initially I marveled at the sight of these boxes. So they looked untidy and incomplete, dull, rusted, and broken like stuff. So I was wondering, how could the Tuareg blacksmiths work with such a mess of tools? I wondered, I was shortening text. This is why it sounds a bit. So, but indeed they worked very well. If they were able to produce such high quality work, I could not simply condemn their use of tools. So I looked more closely at their craft practices in the weeks that followed and recognized an enormous expertise and confidence in handling things, which, as I want to claim, holds an epistemology that guides a certain way of dealing with these things and the material world more generally. And since they make tools, Tuareg smiths forge, shape, and thus determine their own grasp to the material world. So once I observed a blacksmith who, after forging a knife blade, searched in vain in his toolbox for a scraper. Finally, he took a file out of the box, put it in the fire without further ado, and within a few minutes forged a scraper iron. He cooled it down and scrapped the knife blade. Spontaneously and without fuss, he forged a tool to continue working. And this is only one example. I could constantly observe Tuareg blacksmiths making tools while working. For this purpose, they sometimes even used another tool that they did not need at the time. When I teased the blacksmiths that they did not have this or that tool, they kindly replied that they only needed a pair of pliers. With them, they could make everything they needed. For Tuareg artisans, tools are involved in a practice in which they are deprived of their material appearance and permanence. They are reworked, used as raw material, melted down, the tooltip changed as needed. However, since Tuareg smiths can and do make the tools as they need them, they are at hand. The tools are at hand as a possibility at any time. And this is crucial. This is what holds an enormous competence and certainty which guides a special approach while working, and an ease that may appear to some as carelessness, like for me in the beginning. When I wondered about the toolboxes and judged them to be chaotic and poor, I did not realize that my idea of completedness already implies a certain understanding of things and must not be a standard. When I made the inventory, spread out the tools, sorted them by type and size, and convinced myself to put them in order, it was indeed my of things. My effort made no sense to them. To them, the tools now lay side, like you see in this picture, they lay side by side with no sense of reference after I've rearranged them. So, So to them, the Tuareg smiths not having all the tools available always is not an expression of poverty, but of skill. In turn, the need to have the whole set available at any time breeds a dependence of on things. Since things can get lost or stolen or disappear, the one who can forge the tool they need do not need to worry. This is what I want to okay, in addition, what is important to know is that Tuareg blacksmiths do not keep inventing new tools every day. Rather, they forge the common tools as over and over again. And in doing so, they follow proven and learned methods and systems. They use a technology that is based on shared practices and knowledge, and thus they constitute something like a community of makers. In the literature, like surprisingly, in the literature on African smiths, you find not much on tool making at all. Yeah, I was really, I surprised. Why not? Because tool making is such a big thing in, like, this human science. I just found few remarks such as the smiths make their own tools because it's too expensive to buy, or they make their tools after the end of their apprenticeship to start their own business. And as they said, then would be stable and last forever. And this is just, I think, an economic and technical determinism, and shows like a particular comprehension of things, which is, and I think this is important to state, not only like a northern versus southern perspective, but rather a perspective of like users versus makers, because most of anthropologists are users. So yeah, for them, and make like smiths are makers, so they have another approach to things. Yes, I think I will stop here. I was very much shortening the text now to not to get over to have more than 10 minutes. I don't know if it was short enough.
All right, thank you very much, Valeria. The last but not the least, Chigozie.
Thank you. You can still hear me, right?
Yes.
All right, I'm sharing my screen now. Thank you. Is it up at your end?
Yes, yes.
Only the slide, right? Please confirm I'm projecting only my LSA slides.
Yeah, only the PowerPoint.
All right, thank you. So good evening and thanks for bearing with me. I was unable to speak the other time because my slides was on a different laptop, which I thought would serve me better, but I was not able to share from that one. So I am presenting on a topic I titled Grooming and Business Staffing Through the Igbo Apprenticeship Model, a case study of Ikeja Computer Village. Right, and the Igbo apprenticeship model, the Igbo apprenticeship system is sort of indigenously developed entrepreneurship empowerment option, like economic capacity building. It's also like kind of wealth transfer option, which the Igbos developed sometime. It started thriving post-Civil War era in Nigeria, and it was in response, scholars have said, to the economic hardship that Igbos faced immediately after the Civil War. So it was kind of like there was massive poverty projected through political means, and then the Igbos had to think within a way out, and that way out was collective help of each other. So something like Onyaga na 1 year, like nobody leaves the other person behind. So that process came up where people who already were successful in whatever they were doing are able to pick somebody else, take the person in as an apprentice, and then we have that master-servant relationship. But in this system, it's usually that the person coming in is a younger person. Scholars have said that the age is between 18 and 20 years of age. So the the candidates, the master in this case is called Oga. The candidate is called the Nwa boy. And so the process itself, the apprenticeship process is called Eba boy in Igbo language, like playing boy. So as it is, the master and the relative of a child usually is young people that are taken into this process. The master, the Oga to be, and the relatives, usually guardian or parents of the child, have this agreement to start, either usually verbal but full consent. So in that agreement, they will define the number of years the younger person will stay in service, following which he will be helped to start his own business. And after that, the young person goes in, let's not call it servitude, but in a whole of selfless service. You forget, usually a child in that process is not able to connect so much with his family. He sees himself as a part of his Oga for that period of time. And even his relatives don't visit him, but he's usually in good hands, on trust. And then the process could take between 4 to 8 years, depending on what is agreed and on the nature of business the person is apprenticing on. But at the end of that process, if the Nwa boy, that's the apprentice, is found worthy in all areas of the calling, humility, ability to learn fast, activeness, being proactive, then is rewarded with startup capital and then the Oga's blessing. And this has been analyzed by other scholars in philosophical, scholars like Nnadozie 2002 described this as the Igwebike philosophy among Igbos. And that Igwebike philosophy means collective effort is strength. And so the collective effort of successful people is evidenced in their commitment to helping others to grow and become successful too. That's the whole essence of the Igbo apprenticeship system. Now, as interesting as this process is, it's been seen to work in everywhere where you find Igbos living and doing business, especially in big markets, whether in big markets environments or environments where there are single shop owners. You see businessmen, not only businessmen actually, whatever occupation Igbos do, they're able to take apprentices, nurture them, and set them forward from there. This has worked in places like Alaba International Market in Lagos, which is an electronics market in Lagos. It has worked, it's rampant and dominant also in Ariara International Market, which is in Abia State, that's Eastern Nigeria. It's also very common and dominant in Ladipo Automobile Market, which is the major market where used vehicles from anywhere in the world lands in Nigeria and then is distributed and dispatched. But whereas it has functioned very smoothly in all of these other places, in the Ikeja Computer Village, my findings suggest that the environment and maybe the people that function in Ikeja Computer Village is not compatible with the Igbo apprenticeship system. Now, to test that hypothesis, so to say, I use a combination of quantitative and qualitative design. And my sampling method was convenience sampling. I shared structured questionnaires and I was able to get responses from 11 business owners. These 11 business owners included businesses that had single owner operator status, as well as businesses that had up to 20 and above workforce. But now the findings was also a surprise to me, because like 91% of my respondents are Igbos. the people of Eastern Nigeria, who some of them went through this apprenticeship process before they became business owners. But among them, we have 55% who are university graduates, and then 36% others who have only school certs as their highest qualification. But they're all doing well in their businesses. And then I asked them further questions that the nature of their businesses. So 40% of them had staff capacity between 1 to 5 persons, including those who are owner operators. And yet, now the recruitment patterns was also interesting. While 27% of them say they pay apprentice instead of the Igbo style of apprenticeship, that they go either through their churches, their language people, their culture, or their families looking for who to take in as an apprentice. 27% of them said they prefer to receive people who come in requesting to be trained in their business. And in this case, those are the people who pay money to learn, not who come and serve, but these people come in to pay to learn. And then the people who pay to apprentice in this case, they are not paid while they are on the job. Instead, they pay and they are responsible for their own running costs, but they have the promise and assurance of learning whatever the boss is doing within a very shorter period of time, whereas the apprenticeship lasts between 4 to 8 years. Those who pay to learn have a tenure of between 2 to 4 months. That's one observation. The another observation is that some others put adverts to when they want to recruit, but 40% of my respondents accepted that when they want to recruit, they look inwards, like among family members, or church members. Then 77% of them, when we asked the average age of their workforce, including apprentices, 77% of them said they only recruit those between the ages of 10 and 20. And then one of the important questions we asked too was their views on the compatibility of Western education with the Igbo apprenticeship model. And a majority of them affirmed that Western education should go well with the apprenticeship system. But in practice, you don't find the very educated, like young graduates, doing the apprenticeship with them. So I found it contradictory, and I am thinking it will be an area of further engagement. While the apprenticeship system is unable to function in Ikeja Computer Village, it functions everywhere fine, but in Ikeja it doesn't. And so some of the things that could be responsible for this scenario is the fact that the other market environment where this process functions smoothly does not require a lot of reading and writing and critical thinking skills, other than ability to maybe write receipts, offload and load goods, like where they sell tire, motor spare parts. But in Ikeja Computer Village, being an ICT environment, people not only have to be able to read and write to a very good extent, they also have to, the kind of customers they deal with are middle class and professionals, whereas just in the environment where they sell automobile spare parts, it's usually mechanics who are also not so well educated in our environment that they interact with. So my study revealed that some of the reasons why the apprenticeship is not functioning in Ikeja Computer Village is because while the educated young persons may be looking for faster money, quick get rich, quick options, even if the employers, the business owners would have wanted to mentor and recruit educated persons, these young persons are not looking that direction. And then most of them, some employers complain that the few educated persons who they recruited, who should have been their apprentices, left sooner because they are not able to cope with the idea that they can't be on WhatsApp, on Instagram every time instead of looking for customers. So like 64% of my respondents maintain that education is compatible with apprenticeship model, but that's in theory. In practice, we found that they don't have so much apprentices. Instead, they have paid workforce. Now to conclude, based on the objective, I started out with the following conclusions I hereby draw: that the apprenticeship model is fading away due to lack of basic education. The one boy, the people who should be the Umu boy, their familiarity and their liberty online, access to mobile phones, brings them at loggerheads with their boss because they are not able to keep Android phones and digital devices away to do business. And most of these guys who themselves may or may not understand the advantages of maybe empowering their apprentice with digital devices, stand their ground that their apprentice cannot be on WhatsApp when they too they are on WhatsApp. So at the end of the day, the incompatibility in terms of their interest and rights play in, and then the non-interest of maybe the young graduates to go and submit themselves to such environments play out. And then in all, business owners who went through the Igbo apprenticeship model, also some of them, like one of my respondents, maybe opened up to say that if he looked back on his apprenticeship, he felt he wasted his years, that an option for a younger person could be for the person to go submit himself and learn instead of maybe putting in 8 years. Whereas there have been a lot of researches also that discussed the non-palatable outcomes of some of these apprenticeships. Some bosses are very notorious for maybe enjoying the services of a young person for a good number of years, but when it is close to the point of settlement, such persons will be labeled a thief. And once an apprenticeship, that's one boy, is said to have stolen anything, it means he has broken the trust, and the only option is they will send the person back to wherever he's coming from, and then the number of years he must have put in the service is wasted. So some of these factors, I think, are part of the contributory factors, while maybe in the case of Computer Village in Ikeja, the Igbo apprenticeship model is dying off. Thank you. Let me stop here.
All right, thank you very much, Chigozie. That was a fascinating presentation. I've also had interest on Igbo apprenticeship system and Igbo boy for a couple of times. So I know that even if we can't complete our conversation here, I'm going to reach out to you to talk more about Igbo boy. So it is time for question and answer and discussion. Those in the audience can send in their questions through the Q&A while we wait for that, any of us can jump in with comments or questions or suggestions for any of us.
Okay, can I make a comment, please?
Prof.
And it's about the history of the system. I am thinking that based on the evidence from other parts of Africa, for example, and other parts of West Africa in particular, the Mende people would have an apprenticeship system. They would have it in terms of commercial activities and also in terms of training. So I think maybe we have to see the Igbo apprenticeship system as part of a long, ancient system, really. that would, of course, take on its own unique features in the case of Eastern Nigeria. But even in terms of Western Nigeria, we would have forms of this system, apprenticeship systems. So I would suggest that dating the system from after, linking it to the post-Civil War situation, maybe shortening it a bit. It probably goes way back. In fact, it does go way back, and should be seen as part of an African system of entrepreneurship and training. My quick comment is for the presentation on the nuclear technology. Now, I'm really happy that you're working on this, because when we're looking at the colonialism and its impact, we have to also mention this kind of atrocity. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Yes, Chigozie, I agree with Prof. I think it dates back before colonialism. If you are able to lay your hands on Onwokan Joko's PhD dissertation on tool and iron making in Igbo land, he made mention of the apprenticeship system having dated back to that period long time ago. And also, when you read Elizabeth Isiche's book on colonial Nigeria, I can't really remember the name of the book. She also mentioned how big Igbo businessmen go back to the village to take someone up as apprentice in the colonial time. The only thing I think you may want to do with the historicizing this is to kind of think about it along the lines of change and continuity. The truth is that in the pre-colonial time, it was something else, right? So people learned iron smelting and then continued doing iron smelting. I think what happened after the war was because of the poverty and suffering of Igbo people. They also decided to draw on this long tradition of training young people to help them build their society in post-war Nigeria. So I think that is what you should do there. It's very fascinating that you pointed out that that the apprenticeship system it's not so compatible with the computer village in Ikeja. I mean, it's very, very interesting. And then it would make one begin to ask, well, why is this not possible in computer village, while in Alaba International Market, where people also sold electronics for years, it was possible. It thrived in Alaba International Market, but it is not thriving. Does it just have to do with the kind of technology they sold there? Does it just have to do with computer and phones? Or is it a generational thing? What is the difference between Computer Village and Alaba International Market? I mean, you may want to do kind of comparative analysis there to see what's more there. And that is just it. And for Cleo, I just have a question. Because I've been reading about a lot about STS and issues of expertise and the struggle between lay people in quotes and experts in quotes. I'm wondering if the issues surrounding this nuclear testing in Africa around Nigeria makes you want to think about what it really takes to be an expert, right? What expertise is. And when do we trust those who claim to be experts? Do you understand? Can we always trust experts? And then when do the knowledge of lay people also count as expertise? Thank you.
Chigozie, do you wanna answer first? Because this is a huge question, and I'm probably going to write a thesis.
Thank you. I've quite taken the feedbacks to me to prepare to go back to work. I enjoyed your own presentation, but I think you're fine. Thanks.
Okay, so I love this question. I love it because I feel like some of what I'm trying to say has I've made it clear what the issue is, what I'm trying to think about. So thank you for this question. Of course, the expertise is, in the case I've just told you here, authority, political authority in itself sometimes speaks for itself as the expertise. And the point I was trying to make, for example, when you think of COVID, in terms of how the politics comes in as well. So I'm French, and at the beginning of the pandemic, the French president, the head of state, the head of the French state, said that masks were useless. He said that masks were useless. And we know that this is wrong, but he was, this false narrative, which he claimed was based on science, was informed by his lack, the French lack of masks, okay? He couldn't say, oh, masks are necessary, because he didn't have masks to give. So this is one way to start answering the question and thinking more broadly about power, authority, expertise, and where the scientists are. The scientists in my story are not very loud, and to continue on this story of the masks, when, of course, I am vaccinated, I'm not, but this whole thing about, you know, when there is already a market of narratives, a market of competing narratives, and that the French state is able to say from one week to the next, to say everything, and then it the opposite of what it just said, I have more sympathy than perhaps I had before towards people who are anti-vax, because not because I share their ideas, but because because of this lack of trust, because people who are in power are capable of talking on behalf of scientists, because they are not capable of dealing with a public health crisis. And so another way of answering your question, and then I'll stop because I'm just going to continue thinking about it. So another way to think about it is that in the Nigerian case, what I love and why I think my paper also speaks to this panel is that laymen in Nigeria, people who didn't have a nuclear science background, but who had experience simply of being Nigerian, of the experience of the Harmattan wind, for example, could oppose their experience and their knowledge to falsely scientific arguments which were being made by Europeans. And Europeans just lied. They said, for example, that they said everything about the Harmattan. They said, for example, that it blew in the summer because they wanted to test in winter. And so Nigerians, just by through their expertise of life, were able to resist this narrative. So yeah, these are like tiny answers, and I just love your question. Thank you.
If you don't mind, can I just add that Dr. Fauci, the great expert in the US, also started off, as far as I recall, by sort of not, saying that the masks were not all that important. And for the same, probably for the same reason that, they were not available. So Fauci actually, after that, would turn into a major mass supporter. I think science is not value free. That's the point. Science is not value free. It's a point I think, Popper and all these philosophers of science have made. And we see it. And this is really a wonderful example of that. Politics would invade the thought of science. And anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
Maybe I should add.
Sorry.
Yes, please.
All right. Do I have the floor?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I wanted to add a little bit of an omission. I appreciate the feedbacks and they will help me to make this work better. Then I wanted to say in my presentation that the Yoruba apprenticeship model is that type that people come to pay to learn, and is so different and opposite of the Igbo apprenticeship model, where the master takes somebody of his own liking and nurtures the person. He does not, he goes looking for the person, but in the Yoruba version of it, the prospective trainee goes asking, please train me in your profession, I will pay you. And then they have shorter stay. They are never able to stay more than 4 to 6 months. And then you will agree with me that the Igbo apprenticeship version allows for that length of time, the master, the oga, will normally be so generous and will not also be able to hide a team, because you cannot hide something from somebody who stays with you for 7 years doing the same thing with you. But there is only so much you can transfer to somebody as a business skill or anything within a period of 4 months. And similarly, the Igbo apprenticeship system, helps in the cultural networking, because the young apprentice, as he's getting matured and as about to gain freedom, start joining the master to the places where he associates. And so when this person grows up, like other researchers have said, is able to key in. And in most cases, I think that love, because this master and the one boy have lived almost under the same roof for over 8 years. Yeah, I get your sign. They have lived under the same roof over 8 years. So it's you see that Igbo business people are able to stay in the same building, sell the same products, even somebody and an organ and his past apprentice, they can set up the same business in the same environment. But when you check how Yorubas do business, you will realize that the two persons doing the same kind of business are always unable to stay in peace in that other culture. So I want to bring out that love that accommodates the master and the servant within that extensive period of time helps them to coexist without being aggressive competitors. Instead, they complement each other. You see somebody, an organ going from his shop to somebody he trained to go and get a market he doesn't have to give to a customer. So I just wanted to bring out that, which I skipped in my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for participating in this panel. We'll have the second section tomorrow. So I look forward to seeing us in the second section tomorrow. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Prof, yeah, Prof, your name rings bell. I will write you an email. Emegbali.
Okay. By the way, that point that you just made, I don't think, I think continuity and change
Yeah.
is the model, because from what I remember, and I never looked in full details. I don't think it's a paying system. It wasn't a paying system in the Yoruba case. The Malinke, for example, would do just about the same thing too. I mean, you have people being accepted as sort of family, as being part of the lineage, part of the house, and whatnot. Also for a long period, 5 years to 7 years, learning how to be, how to become, the skilled entrepreneur. And so it's, I think I came across an article too that with by somebody who compared some of these different systems. Now you're going to push me to go and look for that article. It was posted on LinkedIn, you know. Um, but that's not to underestimate the significance, you know what I mean, of this system. And so I was happy to listen to your presentation.
Thank you everyone
Thank you
for
so much.
participating in this wonderful session. Have a very good night.
Okay.
Thank you. Good
Bye.
night.